Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are doing something a little different. We aren't just looking at a news story or a scientific paper.
No, we are tackling a feeling today.
Exactly. You know that feeling, right? It usually hits you at about 2 in the morning when you're just staring at the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're watching the news.
Right, and you see two politicians who are supposed to be mortal enemies just shaking hands and laughing at a gala.
Yeah, and you get this sinking feeling in your stomach that the script you've been handed simply doesn't match the movie you're actually watching.
It's the dissonance. I mean, it's that massive gap between the official narrative, the idea that voters are in charge and democracy is messy, but it works, and the reality of policies getting passed despite literally nobody wanting them.
Exactly. And it leads to that one massive question that we all kind of whisper, who really runs the world?
Right.
Is it the people behind the podiums? Is it the prime ministers, the press secretaries? Or is there a structure above them?
A structure that stays put while the politicians just rotate in and out like temp workers?
It is the ultimate question. And usually if you ask that question out loud, you get dismissed.
Oh, yeah, you get told, oh, that's just how the system works.
Yeah.
Or worse, you get labeled a conspiracy theorist and people just back away slowly.
But today we are going to push past those labels. We are looking at a massive body of work that tries to answer that specific question, not with speculation, but with actual documentation.
We are diving deep into the work of investigative journalist and filmmaker Derrick Bros.
And we should clarify, this isn't a guy who just woke up yesterday and decided to blog about the Illuminati.
Not at all. He spent 6 years working on a 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power.
We really need to emphasize the scale of this project right at the top because this isn't a reaction video.
No, he started his research in 2018. Production began in 2020. He has compiled thousands of hours of footage.
He didn't just Google things, right?
Right. He filed countless Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA, requests to get the government to release its own files. He dug through declassified FBI documents.
And he interviewed people who have been researching this stuff for 30 or 40 years.
Legends in the alternative media space. People like David Icke, James Corbett, Catherine Austin Fitts.
So this is a mountain of data. And we have the transcript of a very extensive interview he did where he lays out the entire architecture of this pyramid.
That's the metaphor he uses, a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission of this deep dive today is to map out that exact infrastructure.
We're going to start at the bottom. The visible layers we interact with every single day, like schools and media.
And we are going to climb all the way up to the apex, those shadowy figures who Bros argues are actually pulling the strings.
But before we start climbing, I want to set the tone here, because shadow government usually implies aliens or, flat Earth.
Right. But Bros frames this very differently. He calls it true crime.
Which is such a smart distinction. Conspiracy theory has become a weaponized term.
It really has. It's a thought-terminating cliche. You say it and the conversation just ends. But true crime.
We love true crime.
Exactly. True crime implies an investigation. It implies that a crime has been committed against the populace, and we are looking for motive, means, and opportunity.
And most importantly, we are looking for evidence. We aren't here to speculate about lizard people. We are here to look for the paper trail.
Exactly. Bros talks about how when people first wake up to the idea that the world is managed, they often fall into a trap of consuming fuzzy ideas.
Fuzzy ideas?
Yeah, like internet lore, urban legends. Take MK Ultra, for example.
Oh, okay.
Most people have heard of it. They know it involved the CIA and LSD. But do they know the specific sub-projects? Do they know which hospitals were used? Do they have the declassified documents?
Probably not.
Right. Bros wanted to strip away the lore and get back to the documents. He calls it separating the facts from the fuzzy ideas.
And we should say right up front for you listening, we are reporting on Bros' findings today. We are exploring his arguments.
We aren't here to tell you who to vote for.
In fact, as we'll see, Bros argues that picking a team is actually the first trap of the pyramid.
That is a crucial disclaimer. Whether you lean left-wing or right-wing, we are entirely impartial here. If you are deeply attached to a political identity, some of this might be uncomfortable.
But the premise of the pyramid of power is that the structure relies on us fighting each other while the agenda moves forward regardless.
So let's get into section 1, the methodology and the base. Because Bros didn't just read old papers in a library. This investigation came with real-world risks.
He talks about the open window incident, and I gotta say, this was one of the most chilling parts of the source material.
It really sets the stakes.
Tell us about that, because
Yeah.
it sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller.
So Bros has investigated some very dark topics in his career. He's looked into human trafficking networks, the Finders cult, ritual abuse scandals in Utah.
Heavy stuff.
Very heavy. And he mentions that while he was traveling around the country interviewing former detectives and victims, he would come home to his apartment and find subtle changes.
Like what do you mean by subtle changes?
Windows open that he knew he had locked. Items moved on a desk, but nothing stolen.
See, to me, that is infinitely scarier than a robbery.
Right.
If someone breaks in and steals your TV, they want money. If they
Right.
break in and just move your stapler, they want your mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a classic intelligence agency tactic. It's gaslighting. It's designed to make the target question their own sanity.
Yeah.
To make them paranoid.
And it sends a message.
Very clear message.
Yeah.
We can get in here. We are watching you.
Yeah.
We could have done more, but we chose not to this time.
It's psychological warfare.
He interpreted it as a sign that he was poking a bear. It raises the stakes. We aren't just discussing abstract political theory here. We're discussing criminal networks that want to remain hidden.
And I think that's why he uses the normie strategy.
The bingeable 30-minute episodes.
Yeah, he didn't want to make a 10-hour dry lecture. He wanted to hook regular people who might just be starting to ask these questions.
Because the whole point is to reach people who are currently functioning as the base of the pyramid.
Right. So keeping that level of danger in mind, let's look at the pyramid itself. Layer 1, the foundation. Where does Bros say the control actually starts?
You might think he starts with the president or the Federal Reserve,
Sure.
but he doesn't. He starts with education.
The school system.
It makes perfect sense if you think about it as a system of control. Before you can control a population's money or their politics, you have to shape how they process information.
You have to format the hard drive.
Precisely. Bros points to the influence of figures like the Rockefellers in designing the modern American education system, specifically utilizing what's called the Prussian model.
The Prussian model. I've heard this term thrown around in education circles, but let's really unpack it. What was the original goal of the Prussian model?
We'll go back to 18th century Prussia. The state wanted to create a unified, powerful military and industrial machine.
They didn't want a bunch of individuals.
No, they didn't need philosophers.
Yeah.
They didn't need independent thinkers who would question the king or the generals. They needed soldiers who would march in lockstep.
And later workers who would stand in a factory line for 12 hours without rebelling.
So the school system was explicitly designed to produce compliance.
How did they do that practically?
They introduced the bell system to train you to change tasks when an authority figure signals it, not when you're naturally done with your work.
Right. The bell rings, you move.
They introduced strict rote memorization, and the fundamental idea that there's only one right answer and it always comes to the teacher at the front of the room.
It creates a total dependency on authority.
And Bros argues that American industrialists adopted this exact model in the early 20th century for the exact same reason.
To make worker bees.
Yes. If you have a population that is trained from age 5 to sit still, shut up, and wait for instructions, they are perfectly primed for the next layers of the pyramid.
Because they aren't going to question the media or the government. They've been trained that truth comes from above.
And that leads us perfectly into section 2, the illusion of choice.
The left-right paradigm. Honestly, this is something I think a lot of people feel intuitively. We treat politics like a team sport.
Bros uses a fantastic analogy here. The ping pong ball.
Okay, so in this analogy, who are we?
We are the ball, bouncing back and forth. Left paddle, right paddle, Democrat, Republican, Labor, Conservative.
So we are just getting smacked back and forth.
We operate within this narrow paradigm, flying back and forth, arguing furiously about the spin on the ball. The game is intense. We're sweating.
But Bros asks us to look at the players.
Look at the table. The game is controlled. He argues that while the ball flies back and forth, the actual agenda of the table owners moves in one single direction.
He calls it a gentleman's agreement.
Yes, and this is where we need to be nuanced, because Bros isn't saying everything is completely fake. He acknowledges that politicians fight viciously about wedge issues.
Culture war stuff. Abortion, gun control, things like that.
Exactly. And those issues have real, massive impacts on people's lives. We should minimize that.
If you are directly affected by those policies, the difference between parties feels huge.
But Bros argues that those are the only things they are actually allowed to fight about. It's theater.
Because when you look at the structural issues, there's no fight at all.
None. The expansion of the military, the surveillance state, the power of the Federal Reserve, corporate subsidies. There is virtually no difference between the two major parties on those core structural pillars.
They shout at each other on television, but they vote the exact same way on the defense budget.
Correct. He calls it the uniparty. And he backs this up with the concept of the revolving door.
The regulatory capture idea, where the regulators are essentially the people they are supposed to be regulating.
He gives a very specific example here: the wireless industry and the FCC.
Okay, let's break that down.
The FCC is supposed to regulate telecom companies to keep us safe and ensure fair competition right.
That's the stated goal.
But Bros points out that the head of the FCC is often a former lobbyist for Verizon or AT&T. And when they finally leave the FCC, they go right back to being a highly paid lobbyist.
It's a pipeline. One day you're the referee, and the next day you're playing for the exact team you were just refereeing.
It's literally the same people. And he notes that this corporate-to-government pipeline existed under Obama. It continued seamlessly under Trump, and it thrives right now under Biden.
The names on the door change. The rhetoric changes. But the policy of corporate expansion just continues uninterrupted.
So if you are waiting for the red team to save you from the blue team, or vice versa, you are stuck in the illusion.
You are cheering for a puppet while the puppet master completely ignores you.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've been schooled to be obedient. We're distracted by a fake political wrestling match. Now we move up. We're entering the middle layers. Section 3.
This is where things start to get really murky.
This is the intersection of intelligence, big tech, and what Bros calls the visible roundtable.
Right, this is the engine room of modern control. We tend to think of big tech companies like Google and Amazon as private entities.
Just clever guys in hoodies working in garages who got lucky.
And we think of the intelligence community, the CIA, the NSA, as government spooks. Two completely separate worlds.
But Bros argues they are effectively fused at this point.
Yes, and he uses one very specific, very powerful example to illustrate this fusion. Peter Thiel.
Okay, let's dig into Peter Thiel, because he is a very complicated figure in the public eye, co-founder of PayPal, billionaire, and in the context of the current political narrative, he's seen as a disruptor.
Right, he's the big contrarian tech guy. He supported Donald Trump. He was a major mentor to J.D. Vance.
The media paints him as this rogue, anti-establishment libertarian who is taking on the liberal consensus of Silicon Valley.
But Bros says, look at the actual resume. Peter Thiel is the co-founder of Palantir.
And for those who don't know Palantir, what do they actually do?
Palantir is a data analytics company, but that's a very nice PR way of putting it. They are the ultimate surveillance tool.
Who do they work with?
They work closely with the CIA, the NSA, the military. They work with ICE to track undocumented immigrants. They build the software that targets insurgents in war zones. They're essentially private intelligence.
So the supposedly anti-establishment guy is building the software for the establishment's police state.
Exactly. It's a totally incestuous relationship. You cannot separate Palantir from the deep state.
But it gets even weirder than that, right?
It does. Bros point out that Peter Thiel actually sits on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group.
The Bilderberg Group. Okay, this is the one that people have been shouting about for 50 years.
And it's completely real. It's not a myth. It's an annual private conference of the global elite. Political leaders, experts from industry, finance, academia.
No press allowed.
Zero press allowed. And Peter Thiel is on the steering committee. And you have to look at who he's sitting there with.
Who is he sitting with?
He's sitting with people like Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google.
Okay, think about the public narrative there.
Right. Eric Schmidt is a major progressive donor. He's the face of the liberal tech elite. Peter Thiel is the conservative disruptor. They're supposed to be mortal enemies in this culture war we talked about.
But at Bilderberg, they are just colleagues.
They're having dinner together. They're deciding the agenda for a globalist think tank. Bros asks, so what does that actually tell you?
It tells you that the public politics are just for the show.
The real decisions happen secretly at the table, where the tech guys and the intel guys merge their interests.
This really redefines the whole concept of the deep state, doesn't it? Because when I hear deep state, I usually think of some gray bureaucrat in the basement of the FBI who can't be fired.
Rose is saying that's way too small of a view. The deep state isn't just government agencies. It includes the private sector. It includes these massive contractors.
If Google and Palantir are doing the government's bidding, they are the government.
The line between public and private has been completely erased.
But here's the kicker. Bros argues that even people like Peter Thiel or Henry Kissinger or Klaus Schwab, they aren't the top.
No, not at all. He calls them gophers.
Gophers. Henry Kissinger was a gopher. That is a bold claim to make.
It implies that despite their immense power and wealth, they are still just the managers. They are the public faces.
They're the ones we're allowed to see.
Exactly. They take the heat. If things go wrong, we blame them, we vote them out, or we protest them. But they're essentially running errands for a layer above them.
So let's go upstairs. Who runs managers? Section 4. The hidden layers. And this is where Bros takes us deep into history, because he insists this isn't some modern internet phenomenon.
This was one of the most compelling parts of the source material for me. Because so often these discussions lack any historical context. We think everything started with social media.
Right.
But Bros goes back to the 1700s. He dug up actual correspondence from George Washington.
The George Washington, first president of the United States.
The very same. In 1798, Washington was writing letters to a man named G.W. Snyder.
Who was Snyder?
Snyder had sent him a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy by a Scottish author named John Robison. This book claimed that the Illuminati, the original Bavarian Illuminati, was infiltrating Masonic lodges and governments across Europe and America.
Okay, so someone sends Washington a conspiracy book in 1798. Did he just toss it in the fire and call it fake news?
No, he actually read it.
Mm-hmm.
And he replied, "We have the letters. They're literally sitting in the Library of Congress."
What did he say?
He wrote, quote, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more fully satisfied of this fact than I am."
Whoa. So George Washington explicitly acknowledged the existence of the Illuminati operating in America.
He did.
Yeah.
Now, he clarified that he hadn't personally attended a Masonic lodge in 30 years. He was trying to distance the American lodges from the corrupted European ones.
But he didn't deny the conspiracy itself.
Not at all. He acknowledged it as a documented fact.
That really grounds this whole conversation. It means the fear of a shadow government infiltrating the state isn't some wild Reddit invention. It's a profound concern that dates back to the Founding Fathers.
It establishes a massive historical precedent. But then Bros navigates into what he calls the Big Three.
The Big Three.
The three groups that historically always get the blame for world control.
Let me guess. The Jews, the Jesuits, and the Freemasons.
You got it. It sounds like the setup to a bad historical joke, but in the world of true crime conspiracy, these are the heavyweights. And Bros notes something absolutely fascinating about the dynamic between them.
What's that?
They spend centuries just pointing the finger at each other.
Ah, the blame game.
Exactly. The Freemasons claim the Jesuits are the secret masters trying to overthrow secular governments to install a Catholic theocracy.
Right.
The Jesuits claim the Masons are the secret masters trying to destroy the church and the monarchy. And both of them, at various times throughout history, have blamed Jewish bankers.
And they all have their so-called proofs, right?
They do. The Jews have the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which most historians universally agree is a forgery likely created by the Russian secret police. But it's constantly used as proof.
And the Jesuits.
The Jesuits have the money to secrete it. Bros' take here is very nuanced, though. He doesn't just say it's definitely the Masons or it's definitely the Jesuits.
He thinks it's a messier ecosystem than that.
He suggests it's likely a rivalry, a collaboration when necessary, but a fierce competition for control at other times. They are different factions of the same elite tier.
But he does emphasize that these secret societies are real political players, not just social clubs where guys wear funny hats.
Definitely real political players.
Yeah.
He gives one very specific historical example where the Freemasons were absolutely the ones in charge, the annexation of Hawaii.
I didn't know this story at all until we read the outline.
It's a piece of history that completely gets glossed over in school. We're told Hawaii just sort of pleasantly joined the U.S.
Right, like it was a mutual agreement.
Bros found that the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy was orchestrated by a specific group called the Committee of Safety.
Sounds very friendly.
It wasn't friendly at all.
Yeah.
It was a 13-member group of powerful business elites and lawyers who wanted to annex Hawaii strictly for sugar trade advantages.
And who were they?
Bros found that almost all of them were high-ranking Freemasons. They conspired to overthrow Queen Liliuokalani. They brought in the U.S. Marines, and they basically handed the islands over to the United States.
So there is a fully documented case of a secret society operating as a direct political force to literally change the map of the world.
Exactly. It moves out of theory and right into history.
Yeah.
So when Bros talks about hidden layers, he's talking about these networks, Masonic lodges, secret orders, early intelligence networks.
Groups that operate underneath the official government to execute agendas that the public never actually voted for.
Right.
Okay, so we've climbed past the worker bees, we passed the politicians, we went through the tech gophers and the secret societies.
We're getting into thin air up here.
We are reaching the top, the apex, Section 5. Who is at the very top of the pyramid?
This is where Bros introduces a concept that might be totally new to a lot of listeners. The Venetian black nobility.
The black nobility. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. Who exactly are they?
We have to go back to the Middle Ages for this.
Yeah.
Venice, Genoa, Rome, the Italian city-states. These were the absolute centers of global trade.
They controlled the money.
They controlled everything. The spice routes, the silk routes. And the families that ran these cities, the merchant families, became unimaginably wealthy.
This is where modern banking was basically invented.
Exactly. Usury, credit, early insurance models. These concepts were perfected in Venice. You have families like the Medici, sure, but also much older ones. The Colonna, the Orsini, the Massimo, the Pallavicini.
These families had immense power.
They had popes in their lineage. They had kings. And Bros argues these families didn't just quietly disappear into history.
Well, that's the mainstream view, right? We think of them as relics. Maybe they have a nice crumbling palazzo in Rome and appear in tabloids occasionally, but they don't run the world.
Bros argues that was a strategic pivot. Think about the 1700s and 1800s. The age of revolutions, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution. What happened to the visible elite?
A guillotine.
Right. Being the king or being the face of power became very, very dangerous. So the theory is that these families, the black nobility, learned a harsh lesson.
They realized visibility is a liability.
They moved backstage. They became ordinary citizens on paper. But they retained their vast wealth. They retained their massive land ownership. And crucially, they retained their networks.
So Bros actually connects them to the modern power centers today.
He links them directly to the House of Orange-Nassau in the Netherlands, the Habsburgs, the Hanovers, the British royal family, and the newer financial dynasties like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers.
He argues they aren't just separate rich families doing their own thing.
No, they are a deeply interconnected network.
And interconnected is a very polite way of putting it. The intermarriage factor is huge here.
It is the primary mechanism of preservation. How do you keep wealth concentrated for 500 or 1,000 years? You never let it leave the family.
You marry your cousin.
You marry your cousin, or you marry the daughter of the banking family in Frankfurt. Bros mentions that this has famously led to real genetic issues.
We all know about the Habsburg jaw.
Right, the physical deformities from generations of inbreeding. But from a pure power perspective, it ensures absolute total loyalty.
Because you aren't loyal to a country anymore, you are loyal to the bloodline.
Exactly. Nations rise and fall, but the family endures. That brings us to the actual structure of the apex. Is there one guy sitting in a chair petting a white cat? Is there a satanic pope running everything?
Bros leans toward the committee theory, right?
Yes. He mentions the Committee of 300, which is a theory popularized by a former intelligence officer named John Coleman, or the Society of the Elect, which Cecil Rhodes, the diamond magnate, openly wrote about creating.
The no capstone theory.
Right. The idea that there isn't a single supreme dictator, but a final roundtable, a group of conflicting but ultimately collaborating interests.
You have the royal houses sitting with the Vatican money, sitting with the corporate elite.
They might hate each other personally. They might compete fiercely for influence in certain regions, but they align on the big picture.
And they are supranational. They don't care about the United States or the UK. They just use nationalism as a tool to control us while they operate without any borders.
Precisely. They are internationalists.
And what is the big picture they align on? Because that is the million-dollar question here. Section 6, the agenda. Why go to all this trouble for centuries?
Bros analyzes this very carefully. He says a one-world government is likely the ultimate final goal. But these people are highly pragmatic. They play the long game, centuries long.
So what are they doing right now?
He suggests they're currently building technates.
Technates? What does that mean practically?
Regional unions. Think of the European Union. That is the prototype. You take a bunch of sovereign countries, France, Germany, Italy. You strip away their ability to make their own economic decisions.
And you hand that power to a bureaucratic commission in Brussels that literally nobody elected.
Exactly. And Bros thinks the plan is to replicate that model globally.
A North American Union, an African Union,
An Asian Union. Because it is much easier for a roundtable to manage 4 or 5 big regional blocs than 200 annoying little countries with their own constitutions and laws.
And the mechanism of control isn't just about passing laws anymore. It's moving into technology.
This is the technocracy phase.
Yeah.
Biometrics, digital currency like CBDCs, 6G networks, bioengineering.
It's an invisible prison.
If you control the money supply purely digitally, and you control the identification system biometrically, you don't need a secret police officer standing on every street corner.
You just turn off the chip.
Sorry, your social credit score is too low. You can't buy food today, your car won't start, you can't enter the grocery store.
It creates a perfect digital cage. But Bros actually goes even deeper than politics or tech here. He pivots to the spiritual component.
This was a very surprising turn in the interview, because usually investigative journalists stick strictly to the money and the documents. But Bros talks about the human spirit. He emphasizes that for him, and perhaps for the people at the top of the pyramid, this is ultimately a spiritual battle.
Not necessarily in the religious sense of going to church, right?
No, not necessarily in the sense of the Bible or the church, though for some people it is. He views it as a literal war on the soul.
What does that actually mean in the context of the pyramid?
He argues that the ultimate goal of this massive structure is to completely crush the free will of the human being.
To make us predictable.
To make us totally dependent. Dependent on their pharmaceuticals for our health, their media for our sense of reality, and their technology for our connection to others.
Transhumanism fits perfectly in here, doesn't it? The merging of man and machine.
Yes. If you merge man with machine, if you put the chip in the brain like Neuralink, you potentially eliminate that spark of unpredictability.
That intuition.
That God spark that makes us uniquely human.
Yeah.
It is the pursuit of total, absolute domination of the individual.
That is incredibly heavy, and honestly, it's a bit depressing to hear. If this machine is 500 years old and has basically infinite money, what chance do we realistically have?
That is exactly what Bros anticipates people feeling. He knows this information is heavy. It's overwhelming. But he is very clear that he didn't make a 17-part series just to make people hopeless.
Which brings us to Section 7, Solutions. Because he does have a way out.
Exit and build. That is his core mantra.
Exit and build. But what does that actually look like? Because we can't all just move to a cabin in the woods and eat squirrels.
And he fully acknowledges that. He's not saying everyone needs to go completely off-grid tomorrow morning. He's saying start by simply identifying the chains in your own life.
Look at where you are dependent on the system.
Is it your bank? Is it your food source? Is it your kid's education?
And then opt out where it's possible?
Exactly. If you hate the big banks and their massive surveillance apparatus, switch to a local credit union, use cash. Look into gold or silver.
If you're worried about the global corporate food supply, support local farmers or grow a garden in your backyard.
If you hate the Prussian indoctrination in public schools, look into homeschooling or organizing community learning pods.
It's really about taking back individual agency step by step.
But the build part of exit and build is the key. Don't just boycott the bad stuff. Build the good stuff. Build parallel systems.
Create local communities that don't rely on the pyramid to function at all.
He shares a really touching story in the interview about a family that actually did this.
Yes, the homeschooling anecdote.
A family contacted him and said they used his Pyramid of Power documentary series as the actual curriculum for their son's final year of high school.
They studied the real banking system, the real history of media, the secret societies.
And Bros was so moved by this that he actually traveled to attend the students' graduation.
That is amazing. It really shows that this information doesn't have to be paralyzing. It can be empowering.
Instead of being frozen by the fear of a shadow government, this kid is graduating with his eyes wide open. He actually knows how the world works.
He isn't going to be a worker bee.
That is the ultimate goal. To empower the next generation with knowledge so they can be free thinkers.
So let's bring this all together. We have gone on a massive journey today. From the rigid rows of the school desk to the hidden roundtables of Venetian nobility.
We've looked at the true crime documentation, the letters from George Washington, the technology of the technocracy.
It is a ton of information to process, but the core takeaway for me is that this structure, as vast and intergenerational as it is, relies on one specific thing.
What's that?
Ignorance. It relies entirely on us not knowing it exists. It operates in the shadows because it fundamentally cannot survive in the light.
It relies on the normies dismissing it as crazy.
And it relies on us fighting the person across the street about red versus blue while the people upstairs own the entire building.
Precisely. If we are fighting each other, we aren't looking at them.
So here is the final provocative thought for you to chew on today as we wrap up.
Okay.
If this entire pyramid, this massive centuries-old structure of global control, relies on the bottom layers holding it up, and we are the bottom layers, what happens if we just move?
What happens if we just stop playing their game? What happens if we stop looking left and right and finally start looking up?
Does the pyramid float, or does it crash down?
I think we know the answer to that.
It crashes. That's it for this deep dive. A huge thank you to Derrick Bros for his massive investigation. It's a lot of homework, but it's absolutely worth it. We'll catch you next time. Stay curious.